Hello, everyone. This is Ryan here, your host at Preconciliar Radio, doing my first broadcast today on a topic that I originally had been um, somewhat, I suppose, saddened to see occurring in the wake of Charlie Kirk's passing. But unfortunately, and especially since his funeral, the escalation on the internet over this topic, I believe, has warranted some comments and some actual rational talking points rather than just screaming at people on Twitter. So today, for my first broadcast, I will be discussing all of the increasing and mounting evidence that Charlie Kirk in his final months was discerning the Catholic faith. And I want to be clear, I am not stating, as has been accused of many Catholics by the Protestants, I am not stating that Charlie Kirk was Catholic. I think we would have known if he was. That's a lot more official in the Catholic Church than in Protestant denominations. So all I am merely saying is there is a lot of evidence stating that he was discerning the faith, meaning he was looking into it. Before I get started on that, I want to talk briefly about my qualifications on this. I've been on a couple podcasts and I've been pretty active on Twitter, and certain people ask me what it is I do, why I have certain opinions. And I think it's that's kind of getting at, like, am I qualified to speak on this? I'm not one for much credentialing because I think after 2020 we all kind of saw what credentialing does and, appealing to authority. But I have two unique, uh, I suppose, quasi qualifications here, which is why I think my thoughts might have a little bit of weight. One, my day job is that of an attorney, so I deal with evidence on a regular basis, discerning that evidence, using it to make arguments, looking at the credibility of certain facts to support conclusions. I'm also a Catholic convert. I converted in 2020. I love conversion stories. I watch almost any conversion story that comes across my algorithm, I will watch it. I love watching the general patterns that emerge out of Catholic conversions, as well as, in my opinion, in every conversion story, there is that uniqueness to it that gets to the uniqueness of the soul and God reaching to the uniqueness of that individual. So I love both the general aspects. We see certain trends in conversion stories, but then uniqueness as well. So I'm able to recognize some of those patterns when I see it in other individuals. And this goes into my personal life as well. I have family and friends who have reverted, converted, etc., and I start to pick up on those in my daily life. So I wanted to talk about, obviously, I suppose, hot topic of whether Charlie was discerning the faith or considering conversion. I don't want to do this because he is what's in the news. I want to do this because a lot of lies are being spread about him, unfortunately, when he can no longer speak for himself. So I will not be making any statements about what Charlie was or was not doing. I'm going to look at purely the evidence. You can draw your own conclusions from that. First, to start, let's discuss what evidence, types of evidence, standards for evidence. So this will be a slightly legal, and it's not a court of law, but certain legal standards, which some trace all the way back to the Roman Empire, can be really helpful for when you want to discern your own opinion on something. So let's talk about one of the lower thresholds of evidence, and that's what's called the preponderance of the evidence. That is the standard that's used in civil cases, meaning I'm suing someone for monetary gain. I need to recoup my losses. I think you've harmed me, so I'm going to sue you. And I need to convince a jury that by a preponderance of the evidence, what I am stating occurred. What that means is, was it more likely than not? That's basically 51%. If you have 51% certainty that something happened, you've met the preponderance preponderance of the evidence threshold. Not a very high threshold. And we'll discuss if Charlie's inquiry into the Catholic faith meets that threshold. Then there's beyond a reasonable doubt. This is the highest evidence threshold in the court of law. That's for criminal cases, because when you are on trial in a criminal case, you are on trial for your life and liberty. If you are convicted of murder, you are going away for a long time, so you lose your liberty, and in certain jurisdictions, you could be executed. So you are losing potentially your life. That's why the standard is so high, and it's called beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the standard. What that means is you there can be no reasonable doubt so that something occurred. So any doubt that is there is unreasonable. It's not certainty. Nobody can be nearly certain, but you can essentially be reasonably certain. There is no credible doubt that exists that a certain event occurred. Okay, so those are the evidential thresholds. What types of evidence are there? There's a lot. I'm just going to go into two. One is eyewitness testimony. And, there's debates on how reliable eyewitness testimony is. Obviously, there's like video evidence. That's some of the best evidence you can get. But for purposes of today, a lot of this is going to revolve around circumstantial evidence. What does that mean? Well, it's not direct evidence, but it's basically breadcrumbs that lead you to a particular conclusion. My evidence professor in law school he gave this really good example. He said, if I made myself dinner and I brought my plate into the living room, set it down on the table in front of the TV, then walked out of the living room to go get a drink, came back and my food was gone, but I didn't see it occur, I look around and I see my dog. Let's say you're making spaghetti, and I see my dog with pasta sauce all over his mouth. That's circumstantial evidence. You didn't see the dog eat the pasta, but all the circumstances provide enough evidence to show you the dog probably ate the pasta. Circumstantial evidence is not nearly as good as direct, like eyewitness evidence, but if you have a lot of it from different sources, it can start to paint a picture. And that's what we're going to look into. So then when you're talking about evidence, you've also got to look at the credibility of the evidence. Like I was saying, eyewitness testimony is generally better than circumstantial evidence, but then it would depend on the eyewitness. Okay. So when you're talking about witness credibility, you have to look at the bias of the witness. One quick tip here is that if a witness has a particular bias that is not affirmed by their testimony, meaning they're going against their own bias, that's really strong evidence that what they are stating is true. For example, if the New York Times, which is a liberal publication, admits to a certain fact that is beneficial to conservatives, you have a pretty reasonable, it's very reasonable to conclude that fact occurred. Because if there was any gray area, you would expect the biased source to challenge that fact. Okay, so there's bias, then there's motive. We all know about motive. If you think about like murder cases, defense attorneys can challenge particular prosecution narratives by saying, well, the killer didn't have a motive to do that. You've got to establish some type of motive. And then the dependability of the witness. When witnesses make certain statements in court, they're cross-examined by the other attorney to try to discredit them. It's called impeaching the witness. So we're going to look at some of the sources when it comes to the claims about Mr. Kirk and how dependable the sources for those claims are. So I'm going to start with all of the evidence for the fact that he was discerning the faith, and then I will shift over to evidence against that. I'm going to state them in order. It's roughly in the order chronologically that I heard of them. And then I'll go through the validity of them. And at the end, I'll talk about whether or not I actually think, what the verdict would be. And just real quick to clarify, I was not a huge Charlie Kirk consumer. Like, I didn't watch all of his videos, clips here and there. So I may be missing certain statements that he made. Obviously, most of the ones pertaining to Catholicism came across my wavelength. Okay, so the first one, and again, roughly this is in chronological order. So the first one was a comment made by Mr. Kirk himself, which was that the counter to radical feminism today is a feminine role model, which is the Blessed Mother, Mary. He stated this, you can find this on YouTube, that we should be venerating Mary more. This is, to me, that, and I saw this before Mr. Kirk passed. This to me was a huge antenna went up in my head, because you do not hear the word veneration and Mary in a positive way uttered by evangelicals. But okay, I'll read through the rest and then I'll give my thoughts on these. Okay. Then there were rumors of Mr. Kirk attending Mass. And if I can figure out how to share my screen on this, again, this is my first time doing this, I'm going to show you how these rumors were corroborated with evidence, picture evidence. Okay. Let's see if I can share this. And I'm going to add it. There we go. This is from an account called Belle Clochette on X. That right there in the corner is purportedly Charlie Kirk. It checks out. It looks kind of like him at a Mass with his family. So that corroborates these rumors in the Catholic circles that he was attending Mass. Okay, that's piece of evidence number 2. Piece of evidence number 3 from Candace Owens stating that he was praying the rosary. Now, do we have any corroborating evidence of that? Again, from the same account. There is this. It looks like a rosary. I'm not going to speculate too much on it, because if you look at the way his arms are being held, it looks more like whatever this, I mean, it looks like a rosary, but it doesn't look like he's holding it. So maybe it's hanging there. It also looks like a single decade instead of the full rosary. So my take on this is, do we have corroborating evidence? Not really, but maybe. Okay, I'll get back to the regular screen now. Piece of evidence number 4 are reports on Twitter. So again, I'm not claiming this is 100% fact, but they are circulating that he was wearing a St. Michael pendant that his wife now carries. Not the strongest piece of evidence, but it's part of the puzzle. Okay, this is where things get interesting, and this broke yesterday. Is that Andrew Colvett, I think is his name. He's the executive producer of the Charlie Kirk Show. Oh, I lost my camera. One second. I'm sorry about that. My computer just auto shut it off. So this is where things get really interesting. Andrew Colvett, the executive producer of the Charlie Kirk Show, sat down with some woman yesterday to discuss some of these rumors. There's a ton of rumors that Charlie was kind of changing in certain ways, his views on certain things. I'm not going to get into that, but all of those. But the Catholic angle was mentioned. Was he converting to Catholicism? And Andrew said no, which, okay, nobody was claiming that. He said, but Charlie loved the Mass. Okay, so that's piece of evidence number 5. I'm going to try to read through these before I offer comments. Okay, then there was an article, I believe, late last week from the brother of the Bishop of Fresno claiming that with the bishop's permission, his brother was sharing the story that the bishop had met Charlie at an event and that Charlie had told the bishop he was this close to converting. Also yesterday, Megyn Kelly on her show said that she reported that Mr. and Mrs. Kirk were aware of the witches on Etsy who had cast curses on them, and that they had asked what Miss Kelly believes was a Catholic priest to come over to the Kirk's home and pray over them. And then lastly, Bishop Barron tweeted yesterday that Mr. Kirk was supposed to appear on his show yesterday, which unfortunately can no longer happen. I'll go into why that may be a slight bit of evidence once I dissect all these. So that's 8. That number is important because, again, like I said, the more circumstantial evidence you have, the better. So we have 8 pieces of circumstantial evidence. Well, maybe less. We have some direct evidence. Okay, let's go through all of these. Number 1, the comments from Mr. Kirk himself about venerating Mary. That's some of the strongest evidence we have that he was softening, you could say, to the Catholic position. That doesn't necessarily mean he was discerning it. Again, all of these things have to come together to show that he was discerning the faith. But how reliable is that? Well, it's insanely reliable because it came from his own mouth. So that to me is really solid evidence directly showing a softening to Catholic beliefs on the Blessed Mother. Number 2, attending Mass. Well, we have pictures of it, so that's super reliable. What does it mean? Well, it doesn't mean everything, because as we know, people can attend Mass with loved ones. Sometimes they go for just Christmas and Easter. It doesn't necessarily mean they're attending Mass because they're searching into the faith. But for all the Protestant claims that like he would never do this, or he had, he despised the Catholic teaching, blah, blah, blah. And that kind of cuts against those claims. It certainly is more favorable. If you're going to Mass, you're closer to inquiring into the faith than if you're not going to Mass. I'll just put it that way. Candace Owens and her claim that he was praying the rosary. I'll say as a convert, I prayed the rosary for a year before I even spoke to a priest about converting. So the statement itself is not, it's not absurd. When we look at, the motive of Candace, the bias of Candace is obviously biased. Any Catholic source would be. What's her motive for this? I don't know, generate rage. If you believe that's what Candace's motive is. I don't watch enough of Candace to make a comment on that, but that would be like the critics' claim, is that she's just, we hear it all the time, she's just grifting. And then her dependability. Honestly, I think that's going to come down to whatever Brigitte Macron has or has not revealed in those court documents, because Candace held her own Candace's own standard was that she was banking her journalistic credibility on the fact that Brigitte Macron was a man. So I think, the jury's still out on that one, whether or not Candace is a credible source based on her own standards. So I'll just leave it at that. Was he praying the rosary? I don't know. The photo that I shared, I don't think says one way or the other, but potentially he was praying the rosary. St. Michael pendant that was reportedly being worn by Charlie. This is probably the weakest one in my opinion. I know many non-Catholics who will wear saint medals or archangel medals, particularly in the military or if they're in some type of spiritual warfare. Doesn't necessarily mean they're Catholic. But all of these things combined is, I think, what makes the case. It's not one individual, it's all of them combined. So like if I know Protestants who pray the rosary. They just like the aesthetic of it. They like the feel of it. It feels comforting, but they're not even close to inquiring into the faith. But I don't know a lot of Protestants who do all of the things that Mr. Kirk was doing towards the end of his life. So St. Michael medal, not at all a slam dunk, but it's just, one piece of the puzzle. I will say though, I don't know how you can confirm this or not. It's all over social media that he wore this. So, but some of these rumors, they turn out not to be true. Okay, but here's where it starts to get really problematic for the Protestants. When Andrew Colvett admits that Charlie loved the Mass. Okay, so let's look at bias here. Like I said in the beginning, if you have a bias and you're admitting to something that's against your bias, that's really telling. Mr. Colvett is a Protestant. He's not Catholic. And I'm not saying he's being forced to, but he is admitting something that he probably didn't really want to see happen. Like I'll admit my own bias and my motive. I don't want to see Catholic friends of mine go to non-denominational, Protestant churches. Like I just wouldn't. So it'd be a very tough thing for me to admit about my late best friend or my late boss. But he admitted it. I think that's really telling. I think that and Charlie's own words about the veneration of Mary are the strongest pieces of evidence that we have. He loved the Mass. That's very interesting. It's also interesting that Mr. Kirk, when he was on Tucker Carlson's show, was very aware of the trends in our society, that young people were flocking to the Catholic and Orthodox faith. He was very aware of that. This is so like the Protestants are online are trying to claim that like all of this is baseless. It's not baseless. In Mr. Kirk's own words, he was noticing this. Maybe he got curious, or maybe he was simply trying to understand. And maybe that explains it all. But all the evidence points that he was inquiring one way or the other, whether it be for himself or to simply understand young people. That's the most charitable thing, I think. You could, like, if you want to be the most pacifist on this topic, you could say he was inquiring, but it was only to understand what young people were doing. And that would be plausible because he was connected in with the youth. That was his whole thing. He went to college campuses. He was the youth for a while, then, and then he was into his 30s. So he was still keeping wavelengths on young people, a completely different generation from him. Okay, the Bishop of Fresno reportedly saying, now this is secondhand, it's called hearsay. So it's, again, this isn't a court of law, but we're trying to discern a public event, saying that Charlie told him he was this close to converting. I don't know what to say about that because I don't know the reputability of the author. The bias is obviously Catholic, so that would kind of cut against the credibility of that claim. To my knowledge, though, the bishop hasn't come out against it. There's a lot of heat online for people who make these comments about Charlie. So if it wasn't true and his brother stated it and the bishop didn't want that heat, maybe he would come out and say, this was a misunderstanding, make his brother safe. I don't know. That's what I would expect if this wasn't true. Motive. This is interesting. Like, do Catholics have a motive for wanting this to be true. I mean, we obviously have a motive that everyone be saved, and we believe that there is no salvation outside the church, with the exception of invincible ignorance. So, is it possible that we're trying to do this to a beloved, quasi martyr of the faith? Some people, yes. I think if you know your faith well enough, though, you know that, like, most Catholics go to hell. Just because he was inquiring didn't assure him of anything. It also doesn't mean that he wasn't saved by grace. At the end of the day, we just have to pray for the repose of his soul regardless. So to me, it doesn't matter one way or the other if he was discerning or he wasn't. What would matter is the state of his soul. Do I think most people are thinking that way? I don't know. So maybe the motive could be trying to, I don't know, claim him. That would be the most pessimistic view. But there have been a ton of celebrities who have passed that were greatly adored by the American public. And you don't see Catholics trying to make this claim. See, that's what Protestants are saying. Protestants are strawmanning the argument and saying that this is all baseless and that we're stating he was converting. No, we're just looking at what he was saying and what others said about him, including his own director, and saying, look, the signs were there. And I know as a convert, look, the fact that he loved the Mass, I don't think you can have a better slam dunk than that he was at least interested. I mean, you read enough convert stories, like the Mass grips people. Scott Hahn talks about the first time he went to Mass. Now, he was already intellectually kind of there, but he was blown away, and it was just a standard Novus Ordo. So yeah, this isn't coming out of nowhere. So I can't necessarily say that, like, the motive of some random bishop in Fresno is like to a level of to the level that you can't reasonably depend on the statement. So I don't know. Okay, Megyn Kelly, she was kind of like not sure if, in her recollection, if the gentleman the Kirks called over to their house was Catholic priest or not. So I guess kudos to her for admitting that. She wasn't, like, adamantly this was a Catholic priest that came over. But it's one part of the puzzle. Megyn Kelly, I believe, is discerning the faith or trying to, like, reconcile an annulment or something like that. So bias, sure. Motive, she doesn't strike me as, like, some, like, hardcore, like her content is not Catholic, right? So I don't think that she has, like, a motive to, claim every soul as being Catholic. Her dependability, I don't know. I don't watch her enough. My general sense is that she's a fairly dependable source. So, like, she's not making stuff up or grifting. Okay. The meeting with Bishop Barron. Again, this isn't like a slam dunk. It's just, to me, why do I think this is evidence at all? Well, obviously, he was talking to Bishop Barron. You don't just show up on his show. These people, the way they work is that they've met before, they've had conversations before behind the camera at certain mutual events. So he was speaking to Bishop Barron. This is I don't know enough about Charlie, so I could be mistaken here, but, like, Charlie wasn't appearing with a ton of, like, Catholic clergy. Of course not. He was an evangelical Christian. So the fact that in his last few months he was verbally stating things regarding the Blessed Mother, regarding the youth moving towards, and then he was meeting or planning to meet with, in my opinion, the most, like, preach the gospel to the edges bishop out there. I mean, you can't deny that. That's Bishop Barron's role. He talks to the atheists and the agnostics in Silicon Valley. He's doing the reach out. I mean, Sheila Buff spoke to Bishop Barron. Was basically Sheila Buff's kind of, like, I don't know if he was a sponsor but, like, definitely a mentor in Shia's conversion. So just interesting, like, what, Charlie going on planning to go on Bishop Barron's show. Just a curious schedule decision, regardless. Going to meet with a Catholic bishop as an evangelical, that's, Man, it makes me sad. Like, I really would have loved to watch that. But it's, it's telling. Again, this wasn't a guy who regularly met with Catholic clergy. Now, in terms of bias, motive, dependability, Bishop Barron, I think, is probably one of the highest standards of dependability and pure motive. Yes, he's said some things that people have taken issue with, but he's always super honest with where he's coming from, even when we disagree with him. I've got his book back there, the 2-volume Vatican II set. His whole thing is like defending Vatican II, which I think is like, look, if I'm going to show my bias, I'm going to say I think that's odd. Why would you defend Vatican II? Defend the whole church, Vatican II, and the other councils. But that's Bishop Barron's thing, and the reason I know that is because he states it over and over again. So he does not have hidden motives. He's very upfront. Probably the most credible source outside of Mr. Kirk himself on this list. So, okay, that's 8 pieces of evidence. Like I said, you take them all together, man, I've seen enough convert stories. That's like, from everything that's been publicly disclosed, my opinion is he was mid-phase inquiry. Not like, oh, I'm scheduling my confirmation. That would be late phase. Although if the Bishop of Fresno is correct, maybe I'm wrong. But there is just so much evidence. And I recorded this yesterday, and then this mic I found wasn't plugged in. So the audio was terrible. So I'm re-recording, and I added in 2 more pieces of evidence from the original recording because new evidence continues to come out. And we'll get to the arguments against his possible inquiry here in a second, but I just got to say, the more evidence the Protestants try to throw at us that to debunk these claims, they're kind of telling on themselves. Like, one, they don't debunk anything, and they kind of affirm a lot of what we've been saying. The only way the Protestants are winning is by strawmanning it and saying, oh, he wasn't Catholic. Well, yeah, nobody said that. That's what a strawman argument is. You replace the real argument with a nonsense argument, and then you attack it and say that's nonsense. Well, yeah, of course, because you made it up. Okay, let's get into the arguments against. And I tried to steelman these, not strawman. I tried to find the toughest arguments against the statement that Charlie was inquiring into the Catholic faith. I've got 4. That's important to know. So that's half as many numerically. And then we'll look at the quality of these arguments as well. Okay, a few months ago, Charlie made some very disparaging comments about the Catholic Church in public to Michael Knowles. You can go online and look at that. A lot of it revolved around Pope Francis. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think Mr. Kirk made an allusion to Pope Francis being a communist or acting like a communist. So okay, that's very dependable. It's from Charlie's own mouth, but it's also, I mean, look, I know as a convert, like, I would say disparaging things a year before I converted. And again, we're not making the claim that he converted. So, like, if you want to extend the timeline, I mean, my theory is he might have been midway through. So, yeah, 6 months between my midway point and the start, yeah, I would make disparaging comments, probably. Although I didn't, because I was, like, fully agnostic, so I just didn't have opinions on this stuff. But Charlie is different. Charlie was an evangelical, so, he would have had strong opinions against. And it's funny, he wasn't even like against the papacy per se, but he was very much against the current pontiff, which I heard, I believe, I heard on Return to Tradition that was his hang up from people in the know. So, hearsay, whatever. But like, that's, and I've known converts who Pope Francis himself was their hang up. So that's not uncommon. Like, if you're looking at, does this fit the script? Yes, this fits a standard script. Unfortunately, and I kind of talked about this, how the uniqueness of a conversion story, it usually comes out at the end. That last hump that they have to get over. That's where you see the uniqueness. And sadly, we didn't get to the end of that story. So we're really looking at pattern recognition here. And I'm just saying, like, this isn't odd. this very much fits with standard convert paths. Okay, evidence against number two, Charlie stating. I'm taking this from the Protestants themselves online. I don't know how depend. So again, not super dependable, but they claimed that on the day that he passed, Charlie stated, "I'm an evangelical." Okay, so I'll read through all these and then we'll get to the. I'm detouring here. Okay, so number three, his executive producer said that he was not. I already went over that. And then number four, there's a video circulating now, as we speak, on Twitter, that Erica kind of stating that like she liked being Catholic, but found something better in, I think she said like non-denominational. So clearly she had lapsed at some point. Okay, let's go through the credibility of all these. I've already went through his comments over Michael Knowles. Obviously super credible. It's coming from Charlie himself. Okay, number two, also credible, when Charlie stated, "I'm an evangelical." But let's look at the meaning of that. I mean, again, we're not claiming that he was Catholic. We're claiming that he was inquiring. So at the time he stated that, of course he would say that. He wasn't evangelical. If you would have asked me 6 months before I converted, what am I would probably have said agnostic. Certainly to a large group of people, I wouldn't get into the, but I've been looking into the, I wouldn't get that, I wouldn't go that deep. And also, if you watch enough convert stories, the converts themselves tell their loved ones, particularly their Protestant loved ones, they tell them like many days, many weeks, many months after they've already like assented to the faith. I know I did that with my wife. My wife's agnostic. She's like a nun, None, like no religion. So like kind of agnostic if you were to push her on it, but like just and I kind of was too. And I remember like I realized I was on a train I couldn't get off of partway through my inquiry. And I was like, "Ooh, like I got to break this to her." Because like when we started dating, that's not who I was. So this is, and I had it fairly easy on that end. Other people have it a lot harder. Charlie would most certainly have it very difficult. He was a public figure. And that kind of goes into the third one where his executive producer says he wasn't Catholic. Well, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I don't think that he would have told him that yet because one, he wasn't fully assenting to the faith yet. And even if he was, it takes, in every convert story I've watched, it takes a lot of time. You got to find the right time. You got to find the right words. You also have to look at the motive there from the executive producer. Now I want to be charitable. I don't want to say that like they're just going to like make stuff up to keep their audience. It's just that that's there and it needs to be recognized. TPUSA is mostly Protestant evangelical Christians with a pro-Zionist bend. Crossing the Tiber would be pretty scandalous to that audience. I'm not saying he's making things up just to keep the audience. I'm simply saying that that's naturally a motive to kind of dissuade conversion or thinking of conversion actions that Mr. Kirk was undergoing. It's there in all of us. So, okay, and then the last one, a video of basically Erica stating that she had left the Catholic Church. She didn't say that exactly, but it's heavily insinuated. Again, very credible because it's from her own mouth. It's on video, so it's not a rumor. But there's a problem here. The problem with that is it's 5 years old. And in my experience, if you look at a lot of women who go into mixed marriages, they will typically abandon the Catholic faith, particularly as like a cradle Catholic post council. Super easy then to just go to the church that your husband's going to. But then sometimes things, kind of the momentum swings back the other way. And that's that's my theory, if you will, or the most logical explanation to all the other recent pieces of evidence we've seen of the family attending mass, of, Charlie meeting with more Catholics, Charlie talking about venerating the Blessed Mother. So it appears that she stopped attending Mass and attended church with Charlie for a while, and it seems towards the end of his life, it had kind of gone in the other direction. Okay. Okay, so what's the verdict? Who has more evidence? Well, quantifiably, the Catholics have double. There's 8 pieces of circumstantial evidence, although some is direct quotes from Mr. Kirk himself. The side against, or the Protestant side, they've got half as many, in my estimation. Now, they've been very angry online, so I don't feel like I would have missed anything. I've only seen 4 pieces of evidence. What about in terms of quality? I kind of outlined that. Like, I'm not claiming that wearing a St. Michael pendant means you're inquiring into the faith. But his own executive producer saying that he loved the Mass is really strong. So not all 8 pieces of circumstantial evidence on the Catholic side is strong and rock solid, but some are very, very strong. I think Charlie talking about venerating the Blessed Virgin, and his own producer, who would have no desire for this to be true, stating that Charlie loved the Mass, are 2 very strong pieces of evidence. I also think Charlie meeting with more Catholic movers and shakers, as well as clergy, as well as his comments to Tucker Carlson that he's seen all the conversions to Orthodoxy and the Catholic Church. He most certainly was at least inquiring into that trend, maybe not the faith itself. I think those are 3 real strong pieces that he was inquiring to some degree. On the Protestant side, I don't see a lot of strong evidence. His executive producer stating he wasn't Catholic is the straw man. I'm not saying that the executive producer was straw manning, but people hold that up as if to debunk the straw man. A 5-year-old video, that's not really strong. The strongest is probably Mr. Kirk's comments to Mr. Knowles several months ago. That's the strongest evidence. But that evidence is then counterbalanced by more recent videos where he seems to be softening a stance. Now, not on Pope Francis, but then Pope Francis had passed as well. So who knows? Bias. Well, that's a draw because both sides have equal bias. Although I will say, well, I'll talk about that later. Let's go to motive. Bias and motive are kind of combined. I think the Catholics come out on top when it comes to motive credibility. Why do I say that? Well, Charlie was kind of a hero of the evangelicals. So their motive to keep him in carbonite, really, as what that was, is stronger than than the Catholics. I mean, to put this in gross terms, like than the Catholics to claim another scalp, if you will. Like, oh, we got him. Like, and that that can happen with like people wanting Jordan Peterson to convert, people like happy when Sheila Buff converted. Sure, it's nice that we have Kevin James, but they're not making that claim, right? They're stating that they saw evidence that he was inquiring into it. So I don't think the motive is there for Catholics to, like, quote unquote claim one. I do think there's a stronger motive on the Protestant side to keep him what he was historically. And then dependability. This one's going to hurt Protestants, but like your dependability has been trash ever since the Reformation. I mean, it's all built on lies. Faith alone isn't in the Bible. You can't have sola scriptura and sola fide because sola scriptura does not support sola fide. Lying about the ecclesiology of the church. Now, recently, and on this topic, the credibility, I believe, is also gone because it's all straw manning. Not everyone, but like a lot of the noise on social media is all about, oh, he wasn't becoming Catholic. Yeah, that's a straw man. Nobody said he was. Maybe some idiot did, but the vast majority of Catholics are not saying that. And what I've seen, particularly from those 2 like annoying Lizzie accounts, those Protestants who are like going to war with Bree Soulstand or whatever, they are actively strawmanning because they're tagging her in the tweets and saying, see, he wasn't converting to Catholicism. Bree's never said that, and she's clarified that over and over. So at this point, like, they have full knowledge that nobody's saying that, or at least the person that they are taking issue with has not said that, and yet they continue to say that that's what she's saying. So yeah, they lose on dependability too. So what's the verdict? Well, the Catholics have better evidence, a draw on the bias. I believe the Catholics edge out the Protestants on motive, and they most certainly edge them out on dependability here. I think the verdict is clear. The Catholic side wins. I think we can at least say, with a preponderance of the evidence, that Charlie was inquiring into the Catholic faith. I would say beyond a reasonable doubt, he was inquiring into the faith for at least sociological reasons. Whether it was for personal reasons, I don't know if you could go that far. But if I wanted to be edgy one day, sure, I'd say it. It's close. Again, I'm a convert. I know the signs. He was tracking with all the signs. Loves the Mass. Had a really, really healthy respect. He wanted to venerate Mary. Look, conversions always work when you start asking questions. And they go up the Tiber. They don't go the other way. And I know that as a convert because I was raised non-denominational. So when I started inquiring into the Catholic faith, I started to ask all of the classic Protestant answers, like, don't you have to do everything the Pope says? Or didn't you, like, not let people read the Bible? And because I'm a history major and a lawyer, I have really good research skills. So I just started you don't have to be really good at it. It's Google will tell you. Just check your source. Try to find a neutral source. See what the atheist historians are saying about this stuff. And every single atheist, nonpartisan historian was confirming over and over and over and over again on every single topic the Catholic position. So yeah, like, if he was inquiring into the faith for personal reasons, going to Mass, learning that, oh, we don't actually worship Mary. Sorry, Protestants, but it doesn't go well for you. And what we're seeing here, like today especially, and thank you, Anthony, for going Leroy Jenkins on us, there's a war going on now over this. And the Protestants are just, they don't do well when open debate occurs, which is kind of the great irony here, seeing as that was kind of the entire mission of TPUSA was open debate. And Protestants just don't do well there. Orthodox do a little better. Orthodox are a lot tougher. Like, I wouldn't want to go and debate an Orthodox right now. I'd really need to, I'm not saying they're right, but you'd really have to beef up on certain things. Protestants they really come out lightweight, particularly on the history of the church. I think theologically it's not very good. It doesn't go well for them, but like the history, like, for example, like, who compiled the Bible? Was a 66 book canon ancient or Renaissance invention? Those are just historical facts. And so you're seeing online right now, as we speak, the Protestants are now turning on the Catholics, trying to, and I think it's because of this, it's angered them again. And they're coming out of their lull, and they're really on the, like, it's worse than before this event. And then they're just getting lambasted in the replies. The Catholics form a firing squad and just mow them down in the replies. But they're stepping it up. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because, like I said, most Catholics go to hell. So you have to pray for the repose of the soul for anybody, because a Protestant could be saved in spite of his religion through invincible ignorance. A catechumen, if Mr. Kirk was of that status, has a higher likelihood. A faithful Catholic has a higher likelihood. So don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. We were seeing really good signs, and the takeaway from this is that we should pray for Mr. Kirk, the repose of his soul, his grieving wife, and all the Protestants that are really angry about this. And the only thing I would say to those Protestants is, if you're angry about this, ask yourself if you actually believe in sola fide or not. If faith alone saves, what does it matter if he was discerning Catholicism or not? If he still had faith in God, by your own standards, he should be saved. So you don't have to get mad about this. And if you are mad about it, are there exceptions to sola fide? Do only Catholics go to hell? Maybe you should reassess your own justification theories. I think it's like 500 years overdue. But that's where I'll end things. I will admit, I didn't, and I have admitted this, I think earlier, I wasn't a huge fan of Charlie. And like, no, I didn't dislike him. I just didn't watch him a lot. I have limited time. But ever since his passing, I have not been the same. I miss him. I miss a guy who I barely watched. And this is not a video to claim him in any way, shape, or form. I just wanted to go over some of the facts. I'm deeply, deeply saddened at his passing, and I'm deeply saddened for the state of the infighting that will just inevitably erupt over his legacy. Death is always sad, but this one particularly hit hard. So please continue to pray for Charlie. And if you liked this video, like and subscribe. It will be my first video. I hope to put out other content, not so much on these topics, but more on church-related topics. So yeah, like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed it. Thank you.